Hey guys, today we'll be talking about the development of the integumentary system. We'll be starting with the skin made of the epidermis and the dermis. And the epidermis and the dermis have different sources of origin. So if we consider the embryo at its initial most stages of development, right? So it's just covered by a single layer of cells, right? And what is the nature of said single layer? Single layer of ectodermal cells. So if you were to draw it, it'd be kind of like this. So initially the embryo is covered by just a single layer of ectodermal cells, right, with the nuclei, right? But by the beginning of the second month, what happens is that this single layer divides, and as a result of this division, it lays down a layer of flattened cells, and this is important. And what is this layer of flattened cells called? This layer of flattened cells that is laid down atop the initial layer is known as the periderm. That is one name for it. We also have a second name, that is the epidermis. This is what happens by the second month. Now I'll give you a bit of detail on this later as to the real purpose of this periderm. So the periderm has appeared by the second month of prenatal development atop the initial single layer of ectodermal cells, which are generally cuboidal, whereas this was a flattened layer. Anyways, what happens later is that this basal layer undergoes further proliferation as you would expect it to, and then a third intermediate zone is formed. How would that work? Basically, at the bottom we would have these cuboidal basal cells, and because of the proliferation of these, because these are the ones that are proliferating, the cells that would appear would be in between the periderm and these, and they would be called an intermediate layer, and the cells would generally be polyhedral. Kind of like this. That is how the cells would be. Anyways, if I were to redraw the flattened periderm, now I'm going to make them a bit, they're about the same. Now this is the intermediate layer. Or the zone, and this is again achieved by the proliferation of the basal layer. Now, at the end of the fourth month, that was the beginning of the second, the epidermis acquires its definitive arrangement. This is important. End of fourth month. What happens by the end of the fourth month? The definitive arrangement is achieved and the four layers can be distinguished. The four layers of the epidermis. This is something they can definitely ask in an MCQ. And obviously that will be because of the intermediate zone. Now, if they might ask you about the origin of the epidermis, you will reply with that it has an ectodermal region, or more specifically from the surface ectoderm. They might ask you a bit of detail about the periderm. Where does it appear? Quite initially, in fact, by the start of the second month. They might ask you when does the definitive arrangement of the epithelium become, established. That is the end of the fourth month. Now the basal layer or the germinative layer, this is obviously responsible for the production of the new cells. If you have done histology, that much is clear. Now this layer, this basal layer forms ridges and hollows which are reflected on the surface of the skin in the fingerprint. So it is this layer, the basal layer, that forms ridges or hollows that are reflected in the fingerprint. We also have a spinous layer, which will be the first layer after this, which will consist of large polyhedral cells containing fine tonofibrils. The granular layer will have small keratohyalin granules, and the horny layer will form the tough scale-like surface of the epidermis and will be made up of closely packed dead cells. Anyways, so this is the fourth month, so it's basically the 16th week. Now the periderm is said to disappear on the 21st. And that's it. That's according to KLM. Now the cells of the periderm, what importance do they have? They're usually cast off during the second part of intrauterine life. Right? The 21st week is basically, and they can be found in the amniotic fluid. However, during the first 3 months of development, the epidermis is invaded by cells. First 3 months, but the 4th month this has happened. During the first 3 months of development, the epidermis is invaded by cells that have arisen from the neural crest cells. The first 3 months we have invasion by cells arising from the neural crest cells, and I guess according to KLM that this begins first 40 to 50 days. Different books, different things they have to say about it. These cells synthesize melanin pigment in melanosomes. As these melanosomes accumulate, they are transported down dendritic processes and are transferred intercellularly to keratinocytes of the skin and the hair pulp. That is how pigmentation is acquired. They might ask you a bit of detail about the neural crest cells, because they're the ones that differentiate into the melanoblast, which are the ones that would actually first invade the dermis, then would reach the junction, at which point they would differentiate into melanocytes. And they are the ones, and they tend to remain in the basal layer. They don't go beyond that, although their processes can be seen kind of like, going like this. And according to some sources, melanin production, at least in some races, begins prior to birth. There are a lot of pigmentary disorders. Like the most important things you need to know are about first of all, surface ectoderm, periderm, second month, 4th month, end of 4th month, definitive epidermis, 3 months of invasion. You need to know what is the intermediate zone. These are the important things, and that it is a basal layer that undergoes the formation of ridges and hollows that translate into fingerprints. And these are very important things you need to remember. Right. Now if you take some consideration from KLM, the intermediate zone appears by the 10th week of intrauterine development. The periderm disappears after the 21st week. The 21st week is about the 5th month or so, before that even. That does make sense because the definitive arrangement does not include a periderm. Function of periderm is that it's basically undergoing continuous keratinization, desquamation, and is basically, along with sebum, forming what we know as the vernix caseosa, which is basically a protective layer. Now that is something they can ask you. We mentioned ridges and hollows, and detail is over here. Proliferation of cells in the stratum basal also forms epidermal ridges that extend into the developing dermis. So it's proliferation of the basal layer that forms epidermal ridges which extend into the developing dermis. This is an important point, that it is this layer which is basically responsible, and that these ridges begin to appear in the embryo at the 10th week but become firmly established by the 19th week, and that these appear in the hands 1 week before, prior to their appearance in the feet. This migration starts late into the embryonic period, that is 40 to 50 days, and continue till the 3rd month. And the dermis and the epidermis have an inductive effect on each other. So that's it. I am pretty sure that is enough. Now if we move onwards to dermis.